Let's jump into our cash tag segment. It's time for some social media. For that, we're going to bring in Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com and Fast Market contributor, Miss Jenny Horn. Thanks for joining us again, Jenny. And Landon, thanks for joining us this morning.
Talking about cruises.
Welcome to the show. We're talking about cruises, as Kevin just said.
That's right. Yeah. So the Black Friday of cruises is called Wave Season, and that just ended. It's January through March. It's basically a 3-month-long campaign to try to get people to sign up for cruises and buy tickets. So it's a big time for Royal Caribbean in particular to try to get people to go ahead and jump in and book those cruises for the summer. And what we're seeing is last year was a monster Q1 for them. And it was a record-breaking one as far as revenue and tickets purchased. But you can see that this year's Q1 is not quite living up to last year's as far as our purchase intent data goes. Now, the company did come out at the end of January and say that January was off to a great start with wave season. A lot of people were buying tickets to book on cruises over the summer, and our data does agree with that. We showed January was very strong. However, February and March fell off quite a bit, and the pace for the overall quarter fell from last year's record-breaking quarter. So the fact that they went ahead and released those January numbers and kind of primed the pump a little bit for the market, and the stock's been up a little bit, and now we're seeing the pullback as far as the overall quarter picture has LikeFolio data setting us up to be fairly bearish on the earnings release.
Landon, I spent some time in South Florida, so I see what happens down there by the MacArthur Causeway, how that is basically the ability to turn these ships over and how quickly they come in, empty out, refill, and go back out is amazing. They crank. And once you're on that boat, it is just a spending spree that you're on. Now, that being said, how do you guys do it? Do you have any data that compares cruise lines? Compares like Carnival to Royal Caribbean, things like that?
Yeah, so obviously we're looking at all the cruise lines, and really the way that our data works, it's best to look at one company versus its own history. Mm-hmm. You can do some cross-company comparisons, but just the way that people talk about companies can vary a little bit. So really it's stronger to look at one company versus itself over the history, and that's what we're doing with Royal Caribbean here. You can see it's down Q1 to Q1 from last year, and you're right about that spending spree. They average about $1,100 per ticket, but then people spend about $1,560 overall. So you add on about 40% to the ticket cost, and that is the onboard purchases of, drinks and gambling and gifts and whatnot. So yeah, they can really add a lot of revenue. That's one thing I must say that our data does not track. We're tracking the number of people that talk about booking cruises, not about how much they spend. We have no idea once they're on the ship if they're spending a lot of extra money, and that's going to be a big driver for revenue. And as far as expenses and cost cutting, when you get down to earnings, we have no data on whether or not they're able to cut costs and increase their profit margins. So, from our viewpoint, it's all about the number of people talking about booking a cruise, and we can see that from our data, it's down year over year.
Landon, I want to bring in Jenny here as well. And so I don't have a ton of personal experience on cruise lines, but I do have a fair amount of experience on whether it's Twitter or Instagram, and seeing my friends and other people, they seem to like to talk about vacations even more so than they like to talk about maybe food or other things that people talk about on social media. Is that what you're seeing as well?
They do. It's quite funny because we talk about these companies a little bit on this show, and people love to tweet about their negative experiences, which is just funny because it snowed 2 days ago, so I'm like, give me a break about your negative cruise to the Caribbean. I mean, it's just funny that we see that, and people love to talk about all these different things wrong with Royal Caribbean cruises. But I mean, regardless of that, the stock has risen 20% since the beginning of 2019. I mean, they did beat on their last 2 earnings reports, so they're kind of showing that they don't really care about the negative press they're getting, whether it be on social media or in the headlines, whatever. They have earnings to prove it. So our first tweet is from Stock Pursuit. It says, I tweaked a custom fundamental stock screen looking for a balance sheet strength, recent earnings surprise, and cheap valuation. PEG ratio less than 1.1. Probably best find is the cruise ships, Carnival that led me to Royal Caribbean too. Everybody is chasing unprofitable cloud companies. So this is kind of funny. It comes in a week where we are talking Google, Apple, all these big FANG names. I mean, why aren't more people talking Royal Caribbean cruises? Their earnings specifically.
I'll take this one. I think these stocks, people like to use them. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's as popular of a trade as it is, but I mean, everyone uses these. They're enormously popular. People have it's a binary event, right? I mean, the last person in the buffet line is not having the good experience that the first person in the buffet line is having. So it's always someone's always happy, someone's always not happy. Why can't this line be shorter? And people love to complain, you know that.
People do love to
Well, the
complain.
one thing
It's ridiculous.
I want to bring Landon in for this one, because this is purchase intent data that you guys are looking at. So this is people saying, like, I'm either buying this or I'm thinking about buying this cruise. And I think this is probably, and I want to get your take on this, but this is probably something that people are actually going into, when they're excited about this, positively tweeting about too, because this is, a bigger investment for some, and they're excited about this when they book it, and they're booking it in advance. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is, most of the times, that's one of the things about cruise lines that's very important. When people, generally speaking, when they're talking about going on a cruise, they're doing it when they're thinking about buying it or when they just bought it, and they're not going on the cruise the next day. They're months out. And so, I mean, that's why Royal Caribbean has these wave season sales when you try to sell tickets in January to March, because they know people want to go on the cruises in early spring and summer. And so when people are talking about them, yes, they are very positive. They're very happy. We also look for when people are talking about being on the cruise or just getting off the cruise, whether or not they're happy. And I know there's some negativity out there, but overall, percentage-wise, cruise lines are very, very positive. People generally are very happy about the experience that they had.
And with those experiences too, I mean, you're talking about the cloud companies in the first tweet, but we're looking at, these are things that these companies are looking at ways to innovate and change the experience that the people who are riding on these cruises and going on these vacations can do. And that's sort of reflective in your second tweet, correct, Jenny?
It is, exactly. So our next tweet is from Cyril Cost, who says, digital transformation is affecting even the cruise industry. Royal Caribbean has enabled AI for personalized customer interactions and AR to provide more options for guests, such as expanding the vacation experience beyond the physical ship. So Royal Caribbean also has done a lot of cool things. I mean, I think they're really taking advantage of the healthy consumer by their unleashing the largest ship ever to be a cruise liner, and they're also having all these celebrities on their ship, in addition to this tweet, all this new technology. So, Landon, my question is, what happens when the consumer isn't as healthy as it is right now? Could this possibly hurt a company that is so dependent on the consumer?
I think that's a good point, because last year was record-breaking for them. Our data showed it, the revenue showed it, economy's going well, and that's when people are going to take more vacations. And so, yeah, I think that if the consumer does start to turn down a little bit and people's pocketbooks tighten up, I think that vacations are probably one of the first things that are going to go. So, yes, the economy's doing very well right now. I think that's obviously good for Royal Caribbean. The only problem is that they have such high expectations from last year being such a great wave season and January off to a good start. And our data agreed with that, January being great, but then February and March kind of fell off. So I think that everybody kind of jumped in early and got those deals early, and then they kind of fizzled out. So that's what our data is showing. Again, this is a pretty volatile company, but they are at that 120 level. They've had trouble there in the past. So LikeFolio data is a little bit bearish on Royal Caribbean. It's not a home run, but it's definitely a little bit bearish.
Yeah, and just to sum up real quick before we let you go, Landon, you're basically pointing out, hey, last year, this comparable quarter was an exceptional quarter. It's a very tough comparable, and your data is showing, although a strong quarter, it's not as strong, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Very strong quarter. It's just compared to last year, the mark was just too high. Yep.
Hey, good stuff, Landon. We'll look forward to talking to you later on this week, but we got to let you go.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day.